You know that feeling, right? You're following a company, maybe like Arrowhead. They put out some really intriguing phase 2 data, and then, well, radio silence.
Mm-hmm. It happens.
It can be pretty frustrating, honestly, especially for investors trying to figure out, okay, what's the actual game plan here?
Yeah, particularly with a company that's often tight-lipped between major events.
Exactly. So today we're going to do a deep dive specifically into Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals and their strategy for the Pulmonary franchise.
Okay.
We're working from the sub-strategic implications of Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals' Pulmonary franchise build or monetize report. It's from LLM Journal, dated April 17th, 2025.
Okay.
And our mission really is to try and look past that quiet period, understand the likely direction for these lung-focused therapies, and, help everyone feel a bit more in the know.
Cut through some of the speculation, perhaps.
Precisely. Oh, and just a quick pronunciation thing before we jump in. It's phase 1/2A.
Right, not phase 12A.
Exactly. And that drug name, plozasiran, it's pluzasiran.
Got it.
Plozasiran.
Okay, let's unpack this then. What does Arrowhead's pulmonary pipeline actually look like right now?
Well, Arrowhead's definitely a leader in RNAi, no question.
Yeah.
And their TRiM platform, that's been key to expanding beyond liver targets into the lungs, which is pretty exciting.
Right.
So clinically, we've got a few key players. First up is ARO-RAGE. It targets RAGE, relevant for inflammatory lung diseases. Think asthma.
Okay.
It's in that phase 1/2A stage right now. They're planning a phase 2, maybe late 2024. Delivery is inhalation using a nebulizer, but they're also exploring subcutaneous, which is interesting.
Subcutaneous for a lung drug.
Yeah, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And the early data on reducing CRH looked quite good, hinting at, maybe a different approach for a big market.
Well.
Then there's ARO-MMP7, that's targeting MMP7 for IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Again, phase 1/2A nebulizer delivery.
Now, the key thing with ARO-MMP7, as you probably know, is it's actually part of that big licensing deal they did with Sarepta Therapeutics. That was announced late 2024.
Right, that huge deal. We'll definitely need to circle back to that one.
Absolutely. Beyond those, they have some preclinical stuff too, like ARO-ATSLP for asthma and ARO-IAV for influenza A. And it's maybe worth remembering they did discontinue an earlier program, ARO-INAC for cystic fibrosis.
Right, I remember that.
But the learnings from that definitely fed into these newer programs.
So a decent slate of candidates. Now, this TRiM platform they use, how does it actually work for the lungs?
Yeah.
And is there solid proof it's effective there?
Yeah, critical question. So the TRiM platform, they've specifically engineered it for lung delivery. It targets something called the AVA6 integrin.
Alpha V beta 6.
Okay, exactly. And this integrin is found pretty specifically on lung epithelial cells. So you can think of it like a specific mailbox just on the lung cells.
Gotcha.
The TRiM platform delivers the RNAi payload, the message, right to that mailbox when it's inhaled. This ensures it gets to the right place.
And the proof, does it work?
Well, the data, particularly from ARO-RAGE, is quite compelling. In healthy volunteers, just one inhaled dose showed up to a 90% reduction in serum sRAGE. I mean, that's substantial.
Wow, okay.
And in asthma patients, after 2 doses, they saw up to 88% reduction. So yeah, it really demonstrates potent, durable gene knockdown in the human lung.
And durable means?
It means the effect lasts. They're talking about potential dosing maybe every other month or possibly even quarterly. That would be a huge advantage.
Definitely.
And importantly, the early safety profile for ARO-RAGE looked favorable too. Now, connecting back to ARO-INAS, those earlier challenges actually spurred improvements.
How so?
They refined the RNA triggers, boosted the potency, meaning lower doses needed, and achieved longer duration, possibly even single-dose regimens per cycle down the line.
Right.
So Arrowhead leadership themselves have said this positive ARO-RAGE data serves as, and I quote roughly, clinical validation of Arrowhead's inhaled pulmonary TRiM platform.
So not just theory anymore. They have actual human data showing it works in the lungs.
Precisely. It's a big step.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the report mentions this pretty big investment they made in manufacturing, a new facility in Verona, Wisconsin. What's the thinking there? How does it fit?
Yeah, that's a major investment. We're talking $200 to $250 million for this new GMP facility. GMP meaning good manufacturing practice, so up to commercial standards.
NS4.
It's designed for commercial scale production of their TRiM-enabled drug candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that absolutely includes the pulmonary ones.
But what does that signal strategically?
Well, a few things. First, it gives Arrowhead much more internal control over manufacturing. That helps with quality, potentially costs, timelines.
Sure.
Yeah.
Less reliance on contractors.
Exactly. Second, it supports the entire TRIM platform, not just lungs. It shows broad commitment. But maybe most relevant for our chat today,
Yeah.
it significantly boosts their value as a partner. Having your own GMP facility proves you can scale up. It makes technology transfer much simpler if you partner a program.
I see. So it's not just about making their own drugs. It makes them more attractive to potential partners.
Definitely. It's a strong signal of confidence in the whole platform and their ability to deliver.
Okay. And speaking of partners, Arrowhead does have quite the history of making deals, don't they?
They absolutely do. It's been a core part of their strategy for years.
So what can we learn from those past deals? Does it give us clues about what they might do with these pulmonary assets?
I think it gives us very strong clues. They've been pretty consistent, especially partnering assets outside their main strategic focus areas.
Like which ones?
Well, look at the Takeda deal for ARAAT, the liver disease drug, fazirsiran. Takeda has global reach in rare and GI diseases. Makes sense? Or the GFK deal for ARO-HIF2, the oncology asset. GSK is obviously huge in oncology.
Okay.
And then there's that massive Sarepta deal we mentioned. That was broad, covering multiple areas, but critically, it included ARO-MMP7, the pulmonary IPF drug.
That felt like a big signal at the time.
It really was. Sarepta brings expertise in neuromuscular and rare diseases. The deal brought in huge capital, like $500 million upfront cash equity installments, potential value over $11 billion.
Wow.
And don't forget earlier deals, too, like Amgen for cardiovascular targets, Janssen for liver assets.
So what's the pattern you see across all these?
The pattern's pretty clear. Partner assets outside the core focus. Aim for high-value deals, but retain significant economic interest, upfront cash, milestones, royalties, maybe profit shares. Leverage the partner's development muscle and commercial infrastructure. And importantly, use the deal proceeds to fund their own R&D engine, especially in their chosen core areas.
And the fact AR-MMP7 was in that Sarepta deal?
That strongly suggests they are willing to partner pulmonary assets if the deal makes strategic sense and the terms are right.
Okay, that seems quite definitive based on their actions. So matching actions with words, what have the leaders at Arrowhead actually said recently about the pulmonary franchise?
Yeah, the recent communication, especially on the Q4 2024 and Q1 2025 earnings calls, has been pretty explicit and really lines up with this partnering pattern.
What did they say?
They've stated quite clearly their intention to look for partners for AR-RAGE, specifically after the phase 1/2 A data reads out, and really for the broader pulmonary platform too.
And their reasoning?
It aligns perfectly with past decisions.
Sure.
They highlighted the complexity and the sheer extent of running large, late-stage respiratory trials, especially for huge indications like asthma or COPD.
Yeah, those are massive undertakings.
Absolutely. And they've also stated their strategic priority is to focus internal resources, money, people, time on their core areas, which they've now clearly defined as cardiometabolic diseases, obesity, and CNS, central nervous system disorders.
So a clear shift in focus.
It seems like an evolution in messaging. Earlier on, there might have been more talk about pulmonary being a second rapid wave of growth for them internally.
I remember hearing that.
Right. But especially after the Sarepta deal landed, the narrative shifted quite firmly towards a partnering strategy for pulmonary.
And the consistency between words and actions, the ARO-MMP7 deal is key.
Exactly. It shows they mean what they say. And this communication does two things. It manages investor expectations, which is crucial.
Especially for those feeling disgruntled by the silence.
Right. And also signals very clearly to potential partners in the industry that they are open for business on these assets.
Okay. So it really feels like we're at this strategic crossroads. Build the pulmonary franchise internally or partner it out based on everything, the platform, the investment, the history, the statements, which way does the scale tip?
Well, you can make a theoretical case for building it internally, right?
Yeah.
They have the validated TRIM platform. They've got the manufacturing capacity coming online. It offers diversification, maybe even spin out down the road.
Sure, you could argue that.
But the arguments for partnering are, frankly, much more compelling given Arrowhead's situation and strategy.
Why so compelling?
Just think about the cost. Late-stage respiratory trials are incredibly expensive. The complexity, the risk, it's immense.
And commercialization.
Exactly. They'd need to build a massive commercial infrastructure from scratch to compete in crowded markets like asthma or COPD against established giants. That's a huge lift.
Okay.
Partnering avoids all that, It lets them stick to their strategic focus, cardiometabolic, obesity, CNS. It generates significant non-dilutive capital from deals. It leverages the partner's existing respiratory expertise and sales force.
And it fits their history?
It absolutely fits their playbook, their stated intentions, and their actions, like the ARO-MMP7 deal. It just aligns much better with their strengths and, frankly, sensible risk management.
So partnering seems the very likely path. But it's not just selling off the assets, is it?
No, definitely not. This is about strategic partnerships. Shared value creation. Arrowhead aims to retain significant economic upside through milestones and royalties. They want a piece of the success.
And that Verona manufacturing facility could even play a role in those deals.
Absolutely.
Oh.
It could be a key asset in negotiations, potentially offering manufacturing services as part of a deal, adding further value.
Okay, so pulling this all together then, for the investor listening, maybe someone who's felt a bit out of the loop or frustrated during these quiet periods, what are the main takeaways?
The key message is, Arrowhead's Pulmonary franchise looks promising. The technology platform is validated. The early data is encouraging. That's the good news.
Right.
But the most likely path forward is through strategic partnerships. Arrowhead probably won't try to take these all the way to market themselves for the big indication. This lets them focus their internal firepower and your investment ultimately on their core programs in cardiometabolic, obesity, and CNS. Those are likely the main drivers of near to midterm value.
And the pulmonary value comes through deals.
Exactly. The value gets unlocked via successful collaborations. So for anyone feeling that uncertainty during the radio silence, it's really important to understand that this quiet period is often when those complex, high-stakes partnership discussions are happening behind closed doors.
So the silence isn't necessarily inaction.
Not at all. Based on their track record, their strategy, their statements, the silence likely precedes strategic action, like announcing a major partnership. And partnering can actually be a more efficient, less risky way to realize the value of these assets compared to going it alone.
That's a really helpful perspective, especially for navigating the ups and downs and the silences of investing in biotech.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for everyone listening to chew on. How does this focused strategy, doubling down on RNAi expertise in core areas while strategically partnering other promising assets, how does that position Arrowhead for long-term success in what's always a really dynamic, evolving pharma landscape?
That's a great question to ponder.
It makes you think about different models for innovation and value creation, doesn't it? Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive today.